Hello everyone, how are you? I hope you're fine. I have prepared this video to explain to you how we will go about narrative essays. You can watch these videos as many times as you can and as many times as you want because it will be uploaded in virtual classroom. Remember that as opposed to opinion essays, when you write an essay, a narrative essay, you think of it as telling a story. You will resort to your own experience because we are going to write personal essays this year. The number of words will be as we have been working so far, that is from 180 and 250 words. Don't forget this. Of course, you can write a little bit more, but try not to write so much more because being concise and selecting information is one of the abilities that you need to acquire. So let's see. When you write a narrative essay, you have to think of what you are going to write about, as you do with an opinion essay. The only thing is that here you are going to narrate. You are going to talk about something that has happened to you. And so the way you write about it will be not objective. You're going to include a lot of subjectivity in your essay. And when I say subjectivity, I'm referring to emotions, so that the sequencing of events that you are narrating is vivid to the reader. So these are the steps or some guidelines that you're going to follow. It is very important to bear in mind that you are going to write an essay taking into account different moments. This, as we did with opinion essays, is a basic organization of how to write a narrative essay. Basic, that is to say, is this the only way in which you should or must write a narrative essay? No, you can have varied ways of doing so, but this is the one that we are going to follow so that we can organize ourselves. When we talk about the moments, the different moments of your essay, we refer to an introduction, a conflict, and a resolution. Whenever you write an essay, that essay should have a title. Now, are you going to think of this title at the very beginning? No, please. You are going to write this title at the end, once you have finished writing everything. Then, what's the first thing that you are going to focus on? The conflict. But are you going to write the conflict proper? No. You are going to think of what you are going to narrate, the purpose of your narrative. When you narrate something, the reader should not say or think, and so what? No. The purpose of your narrative must be clear. You write for a purpose. You write, in this case, to narrate something that has happened to you, connected with a topic, of course. So, the first thing that you did when you wrote opinion essays was to think of the thesis statement. In this case, we are not going to call it thesis statement because it's not exactly the same, even though you're going to see the thesis statement on the web too, on some web pages. They refer to thesis statement when they talk about narrative essays. But we're going to call it the conflict or the anticipation of the conflict. So you are going to think of it. You're going to think, what is it that I'm going to narrate? Once you have thought about this conflict, which is part of the introduction, you are going to jot down notes to try to organize the conflict proper. In the conflict, you will say what happened, which is the purpose of telling a story. And in this conflict, the reader will find the highest point of tension, which is called the climax in storytelling. That is, you say something, but you do not immediately get into that highest point of tension. You have to sequence events in such a way that the reader can follow chronologically what happened to you. So, once this is done, you can complete the introduction. What is it that you're going to describe in the introduction? You're going to describe the scene, that is, the time when this happened, where, the place, and the characters. As this is going to be a short essay, you're not going to introduce so many characters. Of course, you can think of your class if you're talking about something that happened to you at school, but you're not going to mention so many characters' names, so to speak. Now, how are you going to do this? How are you going to set the scene? Are you going to mention any detail that comes to your mind? No. In this introduction, in this scene setting, you are going to use all the information and vocabulary that builds up the tone of your narrative. So, are you going to write about something funny, about something dramatic, about something serious, something playful? Is it going to be a love story? So, everything that you include in this scene will be connected with the tone of your narrative. Of course, all this will be related to the conflict proper. You may say that it was a beautiful day and the sun was glowing when something happened that darkened, let's say, all the atmosphere. Of course, there can be contrastive, let's say, points of view or contrastive scenes, but you need to relate everything in the introduction to the conflict proper. Let's say that the words and the information is not selected randomly. Every piece of information you select is connected to the conflict. When I say conflict, it does not necessarily mean that you're going to write or narrate a problem. You may narrate something beautiful that happened to you, but that is called the conflict, right? The purpose of your narrative. Then you have background information. When we refer to background information, we are going to describe all that information or all those events which are necessary to make the conflict, let's say, more readable or understandable by the reader, of course. And this background information will help the reader understand the conflict better. If you think there's something that happened before the conflict proper, which will help the reader understand this conflict better, you will include background information. Bear in mind that in narrative essays you are going to use past tenses. These are the linguistic features of this genre. So past tenses. Do not use present tenses, even though you can also narrate in the present and it has an effect. We're going to use past tenses all throughout. So, if you're going to include background information, you will need past perfect, because you are going to refer to an action that happened before the conflict. For the conflict, you are going to use a variety of past tenses, right? If you want to describe interrupted activities, you are going to use past continuous. If you are going to describe a sequence of events, you're going to use simple past. And once you have finished the introduction and the conflict, you will write the resolution and the title. When we say resolution, we don't necessarily mean that the conflict has been solved, and that's why I wrote it down in quotations or in inverted commas, between inverted commas, because sometimes there are open endings which may not necessarily show that the conflict was solved. But we have to give the story a closure, right? So these are the basic, let's say, elements of narrative essays. Now, pay attention to this. Here you have a lot of different tips to bear in mind when you write an essay. For example, have a clear introduction that sets the tone for the remainder of the essay. This is what we were talking about a moment ago. Do not leave the reader guessing about the purpose of your narrative. Remember, you are in control of the essay, so guide it where you desire. Just make sure your audience can follow your lead. Then, essential elements of narrative essays. Narrative essays tell a vivid story, usually from one person's viewpoint. A narrative essay uses all the story elements, beginning, middle, and ending, as well as the plot, characters, setting, and climax, bringing them together to complete the story. The focus of a narrative essay is the plot, that is the conflict, which is told with enough detail to build a climax. Here's how. Well, it is usually told chronologically. I suggest you tell the story chronologically. Do not use flashbacks, which is a very interesting element, though it may not be the easiest one to begin with. It always has a purpose. Often this is stated when you anticipate conflict in the introductory paragraph. So, this sentence, which anticipates conflict, is really useful for the reader to know to link the setting and the conflict. So you may say something like, I don't know, you were having a beautiful, let's say, holiday. You had planned background information this well in advance for it to be perfect. So how do you anticipate conflict? You may say, I had never thought, or I would have never thought, something so terrible would happen during that or those holidays. This is how you anticipate the conflict. So now the reader knows there's going to be a problem you are going to focus on, and the tone will most probably be dramatic. It may use dialogue or just some moves. Here I suggest you include some direct speech. That is to include some moves, not long dialogues, please, because that is not advisable, because this is not going to be a short story, right? To bear in mind the number of words that we are going to write. It's written with sensory details and bright descriptions that